Hi, and welcome to this episode of The Forge. It's episode number 25, and we're super excited because we've got a very special guest, Dan Rome, author of Back of the Napkin and blah, blah, blah. We're also got a special video from Conan Heiselt teaching you how to apply some of the things that Dan talks about to your screencast videos. And then we're going to be highlighting some of the, shall we say, the more exciting parts of the last 25 episodes of The Forge that you may have missed. So we'll be back in just a second. We're on with The Forge. All right, so unfortunately, Dan Rome wasn't able to make it today. He had some other engagements, so we ended up talking to him on Monday, but we were still able to include some of the questions that folks sent in, but I want to cut to that right now. But if you have any email or feedback for us, please send us a message at theforge@techsmith.com. You can also tweet at us, use one of the TechSmith handles, and use the hashtag TSCForge. So let's kick it over to my interview with Dan. Hi, I'm super excited for our guest today. I've got with us Dan Rome. He's the author of Back of the Napkin and blah, 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 and many other books. And I've been following Dan for quite a while as he's given different talks and produced different books. And I'm super excited that he's on the show today because he's going to help us understand a little bit better about visual communication and how you can become better at doing it. So Dan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Matt, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So Dan, why don't you start off, tell us a little bit, because I'm guessing not everyone has followed your work or knows necessarily what you do. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
Sure. Well, I'm going to go ahead and draw a little bit on the screen. You can see this is me up here, and I've always got my pens in my hand because I am a big believer in the power of using simple pictures to help clarify ideas. My favorite claim to fame right now is I started something called the napkinacademy.com last year, which is an online tool that I use to share my tools and rules for visual problem solving. And the lessons come from my books, Matt, which you had mentioned. My first book was called The Back of the Napkin, Solving Problems and Selling Ideas with Pictures, which was really exactly about that, how to solve problems by, instead of just getting ourselves all snarled up on them, by actually taking a look at them and saying, I see something in there, and then drawing out what it was that we saw, so that we could now turn around and look at it and say, hey, I get it. So that's what that book was about. And then Unfolding the Napkin was the workbook that accompanied that. So there were a bunch of lessons in there. So if someone wanted to learn how to be a better back of the napkin sketcher, problem solver, they could use the Unfolding for that. And then last year, I released a new book, which is called Blah, 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 which is really about how to take complex ideas and make them visually simple and memorable. So instead of going from lots and lots of blah, 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 which, let's face it, in this busy world, no one's going to remember or really pay attention to, what's remarkable is if we turn it into simple pictures, and I love to use just really basic shapes, if this is what my idea is, and I can show it to you, the likelihood of you remembering it just goes right through the roof. So that's what I do.
So one of the questions I've had for you, Dan, is, I think a lot of people wonder, it's like, how does someone get going and doing this? What was your background that led to this? And I'll call it an epiphany because I think it either had to be epiphany or was a gradual that grows into an epiphany. How did you get to the point where this is a thing that you knew was really important and that other people needed to know how to do it?
I'll tell you a little bit of background. So I started out as a graphic designer, and back in the days of X-Acto knives and hot wax machines, if anybody remember those, and if you wanted to do graphic design, it was incumbent on you to be able to draw basic things. If you're designing and you want to figure out where stuff's going to go on the page, it helps to grab a pencil and draw stuff out. And so I did graphic design for many years, and then over this sort of circuitous series of events that took me kind of literally around the world in different jobs, doing design with different types of clients, I found myself in this very interesting role where all of a sudden I was wearing a tie because now I was a management consultant. And I was no longer just a designer, even though what I was actually managing on was really design thinking. We're talking about way, way back in like 1997 kind of time. And what was interesting is with my design skills, when I would go into a meeting with these fancy consultants at big, scary corporations, typically what would happen, we've all been there, is lots of people sitting around the table, and we're all kind of talking at each other. And the messages tend not to be delivered very well because we end up mostly talking around each other. Well, I would be the guy with my design background who eventually would go up to the whiteboard and say, stop, hold on there. I don't get what we're talking about. And I would draw a picture of what I thought the message was that was emerging from this table. And I noticed that every time I did that, the whole conversation would change. And all of a sudden, instead of people talking past each other, we would now have something to focus on. We could all see it. And the conversation would become one where people were actually working together to help solve this problem because now we could see it. Long story short, Matt, I did that enough, and I had enough very senior consultants who said, Dan, there's something very interesting here about what you do. You should write a book. And so I heard that enough, and finally I decided to go ahead and write a book. And that was the book, The Back of the Napkin. And then the rest is kind of continuing around this circle until we end up where today I've been able to really, I guess, make a good living, but more importantly even than that, have an impact on saying, these simple pictures, if you can draw a stick figure, if you can draw a square, if you can draw a circle, connect them, maybe do some little circles, some triangles. If you can draw those things, it is possible to take any idea that you might have in mind and be able to create a picture of it that you will understand and other people will be able to understand as well. So that's kind of the genesis, the motivation, and the impact of what I do. And just on one further note, this global part is important to me. I have been blessed with the opportunity over the years to work in a number of different countries around the world. And what has become really remarkable, especially in the last few years, with, of course, the technologies that we have available to us, the fact that I can be over here in San Francisco and talking to you. Where are you actually located, Matt?
We are in a small place called Okemos, Michigan. So right near Michigan State University, kind of Lansing, Michigan, if you know your state capitals.
Absolutely. Okay, so I can be talking to you in Michigan, and yet, as we all know, through the miracles of modern technology, we can be sharing this message globally. And so what's really remarkable is, although I had a multinational background of doing my consulting and designing, now I can sit at home and communicate with the whole world and really be able to start to share these ideas. And it's unbelievably exciting to not only know that that can happen, but to be able to make it happen. So that's kind of where we are now.
So Dan, one of the things I've appreciated about, as I've gone through your books and as I've had some conversations with coworkers and others about these concepts, I love this idea of simplicity, right? That really you've shown, even in your drawings that you've done here, that you don't have to be a graphic designer, you don't have to be an artist to do this. But have you gotten to having any problems laid out where you just felt like, this isn't working, this isn't cutting it, we needed to do more, something different? What is that one problem that you just really struggled with to make this work for? Or have you not come across that?
Oh, absolutely. Well, let me answer this in two ways. The first way is that every problem that's out there, I hate to be the one to say it, but every problem is complex. The world is complex. There is no such thing as anything that's simple. Everything influences everything else. Everything is connected. You do one thing and it has an impact over here. I try to push it down over here. It pops out over here. So this is the world that we live in, and we know that. And, we've done all kinds of interesting things over the history of humanity. We've come up with language. We've come up with models and systems and tools and all kinds of things to help us look at this crazy complex world and try to make some kind of sense of it. All I try to do is say one of the more effective ways of doing that, but one that we have tended to neglect, is to be able to use our eyes to do the looking and to use our mind's eye to do a lot of that parsing and breaking apart, and breaking things into the visual is extraordinarily useful in being able to turn complexity into clarity. So that's what we do. The big problem of recent history, most recent, that I've really put some time into because I thought it was of critical importance to all of us, was healthcare, in particular healthcare reform. And I don't do anything from a especially political basis. I'm more interested in just getting the message out right now about how to turn complexity into clarity. But I did become very concerned a couple of years ago when healthcare reform first started being talked about, because I got really worried because, healthcare reform sounds like kind of a good idea. It's hard to debate anything about healthcare getting better. So I thought that's interesting. And then I got really worried when early, I guess in the first Obama administration, let's call it 2008, maybe 2009, when healthcare reform first started to appear on the radar, people started showing up at these town hall meetings and getting in fights and bringing guns to these town hall meetings. And I thought, this is crazy. It's like, dude, where's my country? We're talking about healthcare reform. What's happening? And I thought that maybe the problem was that the way healthcare reform was being communicated to us was perhaps just way, way, way too complicated and elaborate. And so not being able to understand what the heck anybody in DC was talking about, it was easy for any one of us to pick one little point that we either liked or didn't like and say, the whole thing's about that, and then blow it all up. So I said, well, wait a minute. What happens if we look at healthcare reform in terms of pictures? What is it really about? And so in the year of 2010, I believe, I went ahead and, working with a couple of colleagues, put together a very simple set of pictures. It ended up requiring 43 pictures, to be exact.
Small set, just a small set, right?
A small set, 43 very simple pictures, but each one was very basic. It said something like, here's me and here's my health. And then that would be picture number one. And then picture number two would be, here's me and here's my doctor. And then picture number three would be, here's me and here's my insurance company, and let's get my doctor and my insurance company together. And anyway, through a series of these very simple pictures, each one of which it represented one picture and one idea. One picture, one headline. So about as basic as you could get. It took 43 of them for us to explain what were the real underlying issues of all healthcare reform legislation. And I took this set of pictures and I zipped it up into a nice little PowerPoint presentation. Takes about 3 minutes to go all the way through, since even though it's 43 pages, there's not a whole lot to read on each page. I posted it on SlideShare, and within a couple of weeks, it had well over 500,000 downloads. And it became the number one downloaded presentation at the time on SlideShare. And I thought, this is crazy, because this is a PowerPoint presentation about healthcare. I mean, what could be more boring on earth? And yet, clearly, what ended up being probably millions of people looked at this, because then it went viral. It got picked up on the Huffington Post and whatnot. And the real message I wanted to share was, we don't have to yell at each other and scream at each other and bring guns and get in fights to try to understand what healthcare reform is about. Because in the end, there are just a couple of very simple principles that are guiding reform. Regardless of where one sits on the political spectrum, the same principles are there. The question is, how do we choose to look at them? And by illustrating this and making it clear, it got a lot of traction out there. And it in fact got me invited to the White House. It got me invited to come and do some presentations on CNN. And more recently, when the Supreme Court, let's draw the Supreme Court over here. When the Supreme Court decided to go and hear the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, CNN actually used my drawings to help explain what the three main points were that the Supreme Court was listening to. And then this kind of blew up. So now I have a side business on helping clarify issues around healthcare. And Matt, kind of the subtext here is that I did not start as an expert on healthcare, but by virtue of doing the research and turning that research into a series of simple pictures, I have become an expert. And I think that is probably the most important lesson of all. And I summarize it this way: whoever draws the best picture wins.
Nice.
And it's true. You draw the picture, you're the expert, you win.
Well, that actually leads to one of the questions that we asked for some of our people that follow the blog and watch the show occasionally to ask some questions. And I thought this one was really insightful, because even as you've done this, as we've been talking, you've been making these sketches as we go. So the question was, how do you plan your drawings so that they're clear and concise, but draw to illustrate your thinking as it's happening? So how do you put all this together? Because I think, it's one thing to draw simply. Like, I think that's a concept, and I think most people will probably feel inadequate regardless, unless they are really talented But then it's another thing to do this on the fly, like you talked about in the meetings when you started. So how do you build that skill to be able to do that as you go?
Okay, it is the question to ask. So whoever asked it, brilliant. Let's look at it the following way. Let's put visuals as second, because people tend to trip up on the visual part, thinking, oh, I have to be an artist, I have to know how to draw. I mean, Matt, in all fairness, look at the pictures I'm drawing. Is this the work of an artist? No. This looks terrible, but that's not the point. So I want to move to the visual part of the question first. Let's just talk about thinking first.
Okay.
How do I think as something's happening? Well, we tend to do that verbally, or we believe that we do. We believe that to be verbal, to be able to talk, is the sign of being intelligent. If I have something on my mind, the ability to string it together into a series of, this to this, to this, to this. And what we've done is we've developed over the thousands of years a set of great tools to help us do this. And these are called grammar, syntax, and language. And we've all agreed on, nation by nation or language by language, what are the rules that we're going to use? And if we happen to be speaking English, there's a certain set of rules. And we say that every thought that we're going to communicate starts with a subject. There must be something or someone. And then there's a predicate. And bear with me for a moment. This is going to sound a little weird, but the predicate is that thing does something. The person runs, the box falls, whatever it was. And then it may do it to something else, or it may be influenced by something else. And then we add in adjectives to describe which person, the guy in the hat, and we add prepositions. The point is, we've developed a set of tools and rules to help us communicate any idea verbally. And so we often say that, nobody has any trouble thinking when they're talking. So all I've done is I've just taken the next logical step and say, look, let's do the same thing with visuals. Let's learn how to think visually while we're thinking. And if we're going to do that, what's missing? Well, the tools are missing, because in vision, we don't have any grammar or syntax or language. We've neglected it. We have always, even though, more of our mind is visual than verbal, we've just let it kind of atrophy. And I mean, we collectively, and we're all at fault. This is something we've inherited for thousands of years. We've let the visual side just kind of fall away. So all I've done is come up with a set of tools, looking on my own work and leveraging other people's work and looking at, cognitive sciences and the neurobiology of vision. And I've come up with one really critical tool that I call the 6x6. It's the 6 W's in a circle, and if we have more time, we can share it. But if not, this is really the essence of my books, which is the tool that I keep in my mind. So as I'm talking right now, here's my brain. I am referring back constantly to this visual grammar tool that I invented, that is really the background of, as I say, the back of the napkin. This is really the central tool behind it. And so I've got a tool, and I practice.
Right.
As we're doing right now. I have done this thousands of times, and without a doubt, have gotten pretty good at being able to draw and talk at the same time. But for anybody who's interested, I'd like to point out these drawings are not particularly lovely, nor are they particularly coherent, but studies have shown that if I'm drawing live while talking, the way that we're doing right now, people's retention goes right through the roof. People's interest goes right through the roof, and it activates our entire mind.
No, that makes sense. I'm actually been working with I have a 7-year-old, and he's in first grade. He's doing the learning to read and getting better and better. And it's interesting. He practices words and spelling and lots of verbal stuff, but he doesn't have any classes really where he's practicing to make shapes and to communicate visually. He
Are
learns
we crazy? Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I've got 2 daughters. They're one's now in 7th grade, one's in 3rd grade, but I've been with them, every step of the way since preschool. And I think we're insane collectively that we have become so convinced that education is about becoming better verbally. Now it is, but it's also about becoming better visually. And I think it is just insane that by the time we reach 2nd grade, we're not given any more visual stuff. It's done.
Right.
It's as if we used visuals as kind of training wheels until we got the words. And now that we've got the words, let's pull the training wheels off, which is a nice sort of visual metaphor because I like to look at it like this. This is our bicycle of thinking. And here we are zipping along with our ideas, going at top speed. And we've got two wheels under here. And to me, the guiding wheel is the visual. That's the one who tells us where we're going. That's the big picture. And then the power wheel can be sort of the verbal. And what we've done is we've said, guess what? We're not going to use this one anymore. So it's kind of like we're all riding around on unicycles, trying to be really effective and smart. Now, riding on a unicycle is wonderful, but it's a pretty stupid way to go if you've got a bike available to you. So anyway, this is kind of how we're educating ourselves.
Well, Dan, we do need to. We're getting close to our time here. So before we wrap up, though, I know before we started our segment here, you mentioned a project that you're working on, the Napkin Academy. I was wondering if you want to share a little bit about that before we wrap up.
Sure, I'd be delighted. So the real issue is this. I believe that pictures are a useful item for us in a bunch of ways. From a personal perspective, if we want to share an idea with our colleagues, drawing them out live with a pen and paper is just awesome. Then what I call sort of participatory drawings is maybe with our team, and we've got a big challenge that we're trying to explore. I believe that team drawing is a very, very good way to do that. It opens our minds. It lets us work together. And then let's say we've come up with a really great idea. And I don't know, let's say that this is our idea, and now we need to share it or sell it. So now we move into performance. I've got my, this big audience out in front of me, and I've got to introduce this new idea that me and my team have come up with. Well, how do I do those things? Well, I believe, of course, we do all of them very well with drawing. And what I wanted to share on the Napkin Academy, so napkinacademy.com, was the lessons of how to do all three and to do it so that I didn't need to travel around the world. So to actually create a virtual tool. And I'm going to run really quickly through the technology that I use. So I work on a tablet PC. A lot of people ask me, do I use an iPad or do I use a tablet? I use a traditional tablet. So that is, it's a traditional laptop computer. The only difference, of course, is that the screen rotates and you can draw on the screen. Now, what that enables me to do is turn my full PC into drawing mode. And then as I'm talking, as I'm doing right now, I simply draw directly on the screen. So if I want to teach a lesson, and let's say I want to give a lesson on my famous 6x6 tool, I just draw it live as I'm walking people through each one of the 6 slices. So that's the hardware perspective. And then a lot of people have said, well, Dan, okay, I got it, but what software do you use? And this is where I kind of blow people away because I just use plain old PowerPoint. The drawing tools are embedded within PowerPoint, but most people don't know that. And the drawing tools are simply accessed. Let's see if I have a screen here out. What you do is you just launch PowerPoint, which is what I'm running right now. And you could have a blank page if you wanted to, but down here in the lower left are a series of little icons, and one of them is a pen. In fact, I don't know if you can see it, but I'm going over the icons right now. And this one is the pen. You go in and you just pick the pen. You can even pick which color you want. And then you just draw stuff. And, you can draw figures, you can draw shapes, you can draw process, you can draw whatever you want just using PowerPoint. So that's how I actually give the lessons. But what's interesting, and back to why I was happy to talk to you, is I'm a huge user of Camtasia because what I do, although I'm doing my drawings in PowerPoint, I like to capture them and record them for playback later, and so I can distribute them through the Napkin Academy. So I just record everything through Camtasia, and then when I'm done, of course, Camtasia saves both so I wear a headset, what I'm doing right now. I talk and I draw at the same time. So here I am doing my blah, blah, blah while I'm drawing. Camtasia is recording all of that for me into a nice little movie where the drawing comes out and, of course, the audio comes out at the same time. And then I just post those online. And it's magnificent. And now I've got literally thousands of people from 46 countries around the world. I'm really excited about that, who are watching my lessons, which I've recorded from Camtasia, drawing on PowerPoint. There you have it.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to recommend to everyone, if you haven't checked out Dan's books, go out and if it means you got to go to the library to see if they're there, or purchase them from his site, danrome.com, or you can go on Amazon, of course, any place where you feel comfortable getting your books. I would recommend it. I know I've learned a lot from it. Dan, I want to thank you so much for taking some time to walk us through some of these concepts and ideas. And I'm with you. I think we need to do more of it and really provide better visual tools to folks. So thank you so much for your time. If you guys, again, check out danrome.com. He's got some great videos out there. Actually, there's one he talks about I think you talk about the fox and the hummingbird and kind of how visual or language has become the sign of intelligence versus the drawing. So I definitely have everyone check that out. So,
yep, there's the fox. The fox is our verbal mind, and the fox thinks that he's so smart. But meanwhile, we've got our little hummingbird over here. That's the flighty part of our mind. That's where the visuals come in, and yeah, it's fun to share both of them. So I thanks, Matt, for letting me share some of this with you this morning.
Absolutely. So we're going to go on to our next segment, and we'll be right back. All right, we want to thank Dan Rome again for taking the time to speak with us. Now we're going to move on quickly to our next segment. This is Conan Heiselt, one of our instructional designers at TechSmith, and what he's going to be talking about is some of these principles that Dan talked about, but how he uses them in his video and how he gets them into his video. So let's go over to Conan Heiselt's video right now.
Hello, my name is Conan Heiselt. I'm the lead instructional designer here at TechSmith. And today I'm going to be talking to you about drawing and using visuals in screencasts. Now, specifically, we'll be talking about how to create and use the drawings that you have. Most of the time when you're creating screencasts, there are a lot of used screen recordings or screen captures. However, there are times when drawings and other static images are ideal. One of those times is when you need to explain something conceptual. So notes not so much how to, but kind of the why and what's going on, bigger picture, that type of thing. As an example, I recently created a screencast about zooming and scaling in screencasts. Actually no how-tos, just a lot of really what is going on and helping people to understand what's happening. Now we're going to talk about a couple things. First of all, we're going to talk about how do you figure out what to show or what to create as far as visuals and drawings. The next is how to create and use the visuals you made in a screencast. Now, as with most good problems, you need to start by asking questions. The first most important question is, what's really the big thing that I need to communicate here? It's very important to break it down and to define that. As an example, in my screencast, at this point in the tutorial, I'm talking about optical zooming. And so I wanted my viewers, to really understand the difference between digital zoom or scaling and this optical zoom. And so I needed a visual that would portray that. Next, you need to think about what in the image will be relevant. You can create images in many different ways, and sometimes images have things that are important and sometimes not. So it's important to think about what's relevant and what's distracting. Next, you need to think about what will the viewers be able to relate to. There are many things that I could have chosen here as a visual. I could have chosen a big, huge telescope or something like that. But I thought, most people have experience with cameras and zooming in on cameras, and whether they knew it or not, that was an optical zoom. So that's why I chose this image of a camera. And finally, when you're deciding and creating those images, it's important to think about, how will I need to layer these images? How will they need to turn out? As an example, in my tutorial, I have the back of a camera, and in this camera I need to show a real image that zooms in and out. So I had to actually create the image of my camera actually has a hole in it so that I can see what's behind. All right, moving along. Obviously, as I mentioned before, there are different types of images. You can have the drawn images and pictures or screenshots, the real images. Each have their advantages and disadvantages. The advantages of drawn images are that they're simpler for the viewer to understand. Research has shown that too many details in very realistic images or pictures can actually distract learners and distract viewers from getting the core of the message. On the other hand, real pictures or screenshots may have the details that are essential and important for them to understand what you're talking about. So you'll need to decide, do I want a drawn image or do I want a screenshot? Now, oftentimes people veer away from drawn images because they think that they're less clear or they're uncomfortable with their ability. And let me make it very clear that the quality of your drawing, for the most part, is completely unconnected to the communication value it has. You can see my pictures, they're really not fancy, not that good at all. However, they get the point across in the context that I'm using them. All right, now let's go back to my tutorial, and I'll walk through a few more how-tos of the decisions that I've made. One of the things that reoccurs many times in this tutorial is this idea of misconceptions. And so I have this image of someone thinking, and then I'll show kind of an icon that represents this misconception and go on ahead and explain it. So I have this image that I reuse again and again to help bring in consistency. Now, I already explained why I chose the picture of the camera, but to create this picture of the camera, I thought, maybe I could do a point and click, which most people have. However, this SLR is more iconic. It's easier to understand. However, I wasn't comfortable so much with making my own freehand. So what I did is I went into Illustrator. That's generally the application I use. There's lots and lots of other applications you can use for creating. I got a real image, created another blank layer on top of it, and then essentially all I did was trace lines around the main points and then hid the real image, and there you go. Now I have a picture of a camera that looks recognizable, and that's the important thing. It needs to be recognizable. It doesn't need to be a work of art. That's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about art. We're talking about communication. As you can see, I definitely do mix real screenshots and images. And very often what I will do is augment a real image with something that I've created, either drawn or created in Snagit. Right, here's a good example. I have a real image that's been blown up to show the pixels, but I needed to show what is being added to. So I drew this, so I created these boxes around to add to. And so that's an example of how you can augment with images. All right, that's it. I hope this has been valuable. Remember, next time you're creating your screencast, think about, are there images that I can use, get from somewhere, or draw, create myself that will help people understand and communicate?
All right, thanks to Conan Heiselt for that great video. If you haven't checked out today's blog, he's got another great video that explains zooming. If you ever had questions about zooming and why you get blurry videos, go check it out. It's fantastic. Now, to wrap things up for today's show, because we know Dan's interview was a little bit long compared to a normal show, we're going to go through this quickly. But believe it or not, we've been on for we've done 25 different episodes and several smaller little things we call forgelets. You probably haven't seen most of them. So I want to highlight just a few quickly. We're going to put these links on the blog so they're easy to get to, but a couple that I think you should go check out. And let's go through them real quick. If you didn't see Dan Nunez's clipboard video, all about how to use copy paste in the clipboard, go check that out. Maybe you should have checked out our episode about Snagit, where we talk with Bill Hamilton about how Snagit's been around for over 20 years now. Very fascinating stuff if you're interested in corporate culture and how a product gets from being a small product to a big product. Then, hey, what about this? We go to another episode here where I believe this one is where we talked to Mel Claro. He's a professional screencaster. You know what a professional screencaster does? They make their living making screencasts. Go check out. He's got a lot of great tips, tricks, things like that. Hey, did you know you can record your mobile devices? Got an iPhone, iPad, an Android tablet. You want to record those and make screencasts? You can do it. We got some great video stuff in one of our videos. Cliff Atkinson, hey, Dan Rome just presented some really awesome stuff about how to sketch. Well, Cliff Atkinson actually tells you how to use stories and images to put together really great presentations. And he would know what a great presentation is. One of his got like $1 billion settlement in a court case. He knows a good story if anyone does. Hey, have you heard about flipped classroom? Well, we've been talking about the flipped classroom here on The Forge for a long time. We had Lee Graves Wolf on the show, and guess what? She talks about some of these concepts and some cool things that are happening in education and technology. Go check it out if you haven't seen it. Hey, did you know Betsy Weber? Oh, we love Betsy wherever she is in the world. Well, guess what she did? If you just want a good laugh. She has a cupcake. We printed on that cupcake with a MakerBot. And then, do you know what she did with that cupcake? Well, watch the screen here. We're going to give away a couple shirts for the people that submit for us. We're going to give away shirts? Sure. If you're really lucky, I could send you this cupcake, but I might lick it first. Boom! All right. Yeah. So things you might have missed on The Forge is me getting a cupcake shoved in my face. There were so many pieces in different parts of the episodes, I couldn't list them all, but we're going to put a bunch of links on the blog post and with the YouTube video. Go check them out. Those are all great and still relevant parts of information that you might want. If you like the interview with Dan Rome, we've got more of those types of interviews out there. And we're looking forward to another 25 awesome episodes and more here on The Forge. So we want to thank all of our friends and guests and all the people that help out on the show. Thanks, and we will be back in February. Sometime around here, we're going to have Dave Gray, author of Game Storming and the Connected Company. We interviewed with him, and he's gonna be talking with us as well. Another great visual artist. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time here on The Forge.